Have you ever spent your whole life building something only to watch it handed to someone who never earned it? My name is Ethan Morales. For over 2 decades, I was the man behind every major contract, every hiring decision, every investor pitch in my family's tech company. I didn't chase praise. I didn't care about titles. I cared about results. I thought that would be enough. Until the day I sat across from my stepmother and the company lawyer and heard the words that changed everything. The business I helped grow from a garage startup to a multi-million-dollar firm wasn't mine. It never had been, not legally, not emotionally, not to the people who now controlled it. They handed everything over to my stepbrother, the one who'd never stayed in one job longer than a year, whose main qualification was being charming at dinner. What followed wasn't loud, it wasn't public, but it was justice. The kind of justice that doesn't need applause, just results. If you've ever been underestimated, replaced, or betrayed quietly, this story is for you. Listen closely, and if it hits home, let me know in the comments. Like and subscribe, because sometimes the best revenge is knowing your worth. You've always been more capable, Ethan. But Alex needs this more, Valerie said softly, her voice polished like always. The lawyer across the table didn't flinch. He slid the final set of documents forward, gesturing for a signature that didn't require mine. The family business Morales Dynamics was now officially under my stepbrother's control. I stared at the papers, each line confirming what I'd suspected for months, maybe years. Still seeing it in writing stripped away every last illusion. I didn't argue. I didn't ask questions. I stood up from the cold marble table, nodded at the attorney, and left the glass office tower that bore our family's name in chrome letters. It was raining in Palo Alto that morning. I didn't bring an umbrella. Alex, my stepmother, Valerie's son from a previous marriage, smiled as I passed him. He wore that tailored blue suit he always chose for big moments, the one that made him look like an overconfident venture capitalist on a podcast cover. "We'll keep you in the loop," he offered, like he was doing me a favor. I said nothing. I didn't trust myself to speak. As I reached the street, my phone buzzed. It was Ava, my cousin and Morales Dynamics' head of operations for the past 7 years. She didn't ask what happened. She already knew. "You okay?" she asked. I paused at the corner, watching cars glide through the intersection like nothing had changed. "They gave it to him," I said. "I built that company with Dad from scratch, and they handed it to Alex like it was some tech prize in a raffle." Silence. Then Ava whispered, "I'm so sorry, Ethan. None of this is right. Everyone knows who actually made this company work." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Apparently, that doesn't matter anymore," I replied, my voice flat. The walk back to my condo was quiet. My mind wasn't. I replayed the last 2 decades like a highlight reel, late nights, debugging code, early morning supplier calls, back-to-back cross-country flights for investor meetings. While Alex was posting motivational quotes on Instagram and starting half-baked startups, I was keeping the business solvent during 2 recessions. But that didn't get written into a will. Alex joined the company 3 years ago, barely. Dad gave him a flashy title, Director of Strategic Vision. No one really knew what he did, but it sounded important, and Valerie always made sure he was present during client dinners and earnings calls, even when he had nothing to say. "He has a good instinct for branding," she once said, as if that outweighed a decade of product development and personnel management. The worst part wasn't losing the company. It was the realization that my father, the man who once told me I was his right hand, had decided I didn't need an inheritance because I could rebuild anything. And maybe he was right, but that didn't make it hurt less. Being the strong one is a thankless position. It makes people believe you don't need support, that you'll be fine no matter what they take from you. I spent the afternoon sitting at my dining table, blinds closed, staring at the NDA the lawyer had slipped into my folder standard. They said just a formality. "Don't speak to press. Don't solicit clients. Don't interfere." That's when it hit me. They didn't just cut me out. They wanted me erased, and if they thought I'd disappear quietly, they didn't understand what I had really built. Not a company, not a title. But something deeper, harder to steal: loyalty, respect, and relationships no document could transfer. The kind of foundation that doesn't collapse when someone else takes your seat. They could have the building. I still had the blueprint. The story everyone loved to tell was that Morales Dynamics had started in my father's garage with a borrowed laptop and a dream. What they always left out was how that garage was in foreclosure and how my dad nearly walked away from it all before I convinced him to give it one more year, just one. I was 23 at the time, fresh out of Stanford, and I'd turned down 2 job offers from well-funded firms because I believed in what we were building. Not the code, not the pitch decks, the people, the mission. In those early years, I handled everything that wasn't code. My dad was a brilliant engineer, but he couldn't manage a calendar, let alone a budget. I took over operations, fundraising contracts, onboarding, client relations. I met our first angel investor at a networking event I wasn't even supposed to attend. When the dot-com bubble burst, I negotiated payment plans with vendors, downsized responsibly, and kept the core team together. We made it through because I refused to let it fall apart. I never needed my name on the company masthead. I wasn't in this for prestige. What mattered to me were the relationships, the back-end team that stayed with us for over a decade, the developers who stuck through 2 rounds of lean funding, the clients who called my cell at midnight because they knew I'd fix things. Meanwhile, Alex was chasing hashtags. He jumped from digital marketing to crypto, from fashion tech to app development, rarely staying more than a year in any project. His resume looked like a collection of startup logos with no traction behind them. When he finally circled back to Morales Dynamics, it wasn't because he had something to offer, it was because he had nowhere else to go. But Valerie framed it differently. He's finally ready to step into the family legacy. As if the work I'd done wasn't part of that legacy. Still, I didn't push back. I welcomed him, introduced him to the team, gave him space to learn. I figured he'd find his place eventually or leave quietly again. But I underestimated how powerful perception could be. Valerie made sure he was always visible. She championed his vision at investor meetings and encouraged Dad to let him speak during presentations. When I questioned his decisions, like suggesting we double our rates during a recession, she brushed me off. "He's thinking big," she said. "You're just stuck in operations." What they forgot to mention in the narrative they built around Alex's rise was that he hadn't actually done anything. The systems that kept the company running, I designed them. The loyalty we had from top clients, I earned it. The engineers who hit their deadlines and delivered every time I hired them, trained them, protected them. But when the spotlight turned on, none of that mattered. People love stories. And Valerie gave them a shiny one, the bold young visionary taking over a legacy company. I wasn't part of that story anymore. I was the scaffolding, useful until the building was complete, then quietly removed. Looking back, the signs were all there. They just didn't come like lightning strikes. They came like slow drips. Quiet, subtle, almost polite. The first shift was a small one. I noticed my admin privileges on our project management system had been downgraded. It seemed like a glitch. When I brought it up to our CTO, he shrugged and said, "Alex wanted to centralize permissions' new protocol." I didn't think much of it. I had other ways to access what I needed. A week later, a long-standing client, Denova Health Tech, called to confirm a strategy call that I knew nothing about. "We're scheduled with Alex tomorrow to review our integration pipeline," their rep said. That was my account, one I had personally nurtured through 2 product overhauls and countless late-night bug patches. I called Alex. He said, "Oh, didn't think you'd be interested in those kinds of meetings anymore. It's all branding and direction now." I told myself he meant well. Maybe he thought he was helping. But things kept happening. My name was removed from a press release, then from a VC pitch deck. Valerie, of course, had a rational explanation each time. "We're just trying to simplify our messaging. Too many names confuse investors." Soon after, a junior analyst fresh out of business school was brought into meetings I used to run alone. He shadowed me at first, then started scheduling his own check-ins with my clients, forwarding summaries to Alex. It's just part of the transition, Valerie told me during a casual chat over coffee. You've been doing so much for so long. Maybe it's time you let others take a bit of the weight. Weight, that's what they called it. Not leadership, not commitment, just weight to be redistributed, preferably away from me. Then came the real sting. At our annual leadership offsite, I found out about a major restructure plan that I hadn't been looped into. A full department merger was underway, 2 teams I had overseen for over a decade without my input. When I confronted Dad, he looked tired. Ethan, I didn't think we needed to run every detail through you. You've always handled everything. We're trying to empower others now. I said nothing, but inside something cracked. That same week, my approval rights on contract negotiations were quietly disabled. No email, no meeting, just gone. When I followed up with legal, they told me Alex and Valerie had suggested a temporary streamlining of authority. I still wasn't angry. Not yet. I was confused, disoriented, and embarrassingly hopeful that maybe things would swing back. Maybe they were just preparing for my promotion. Maybe I was being groomed for a more strategic role. After all, my father had always said, "You're the engine, son. This place runs because of you." But engines, I realized, don't get credit. They get taken for granted until they're replaced. I didn't speak up. I didn't push back. I thought loyalty would protect me. I thought 2 decades of sweat and sacrifice meant something. But the truth was starting to sink in. They weren't sidelining me by accident. They were rehearsing a world without me. It was the Monday after the will reading when I finally let myself walk into my father's old office. He hadn't used it much in his last year, too weak, too tired, but no one had cleared it out yet. The desk still smelled faintly of cedar oil and old coffee. His leather chair creaked as I sat down, and for a moment I didn't move. I just let the silence wrap around me like an old jacket. Then I opened the bottom drawer. That's when the truth started surfacing. I found a manila folder labeled Corporate Holdings, Revisions. Inside were documents dated over a year ago, all signed. The main IP asset from Morales Dynamics, the core software suite we built our entire reputation on, had been transferred to a holding company called Strateg Partners. I didn't recognize the name, but a quick search in the corporate registry showed it was a Shell LLC registered in Delaware with a mailing address matching Valerie's real estate office. Another folder showed something worse. Our top 3 vendor contracts previously under Morales Dynamics had been restructured, now funneled through a new intermediary management firm. That firm was controlled by Alex. My name was nowhere. I hadn't signed a single one of these revisions. They had planned this quietly, legally. The final blow came when I opened a sealed envelope marked Payroll Control Update. Inside the new payroll structure delegated final approval to Alex and someone from Valerie's legal team. I scanned for signatures. My father's initials were there. From 6 months before he passed. This wasn't a last-minute decision. This had been in motion for over a year. They hadn't just inherited the company. They had prepared for my removal with surgical precision. Every contract renegotiated, every account rerouted. My access phased out not because I wasn't needed, but because I had been studied, quietly mapped, disassembled. I sat in that chair with the files scattered in front of me, my hands clenched so tightly I could feel my pulse in my palms. I remembered how my dad used to say that nothing mattered more than loyalty. People stick with us because they know we don't change when the wind does. He used to call me the quiet anchor of the company. But now I saw clearly even anchors get cut loose when the new ship wants to sail lighter. They had every legal angle covered, every document in place. But they had made one arrogant assumption that my value could be transferred, that relationships built on midnight calls, hard-won trust, and years of consistency could be reassigned like office furniture. They forgot that legacy isn't just contracts and code. It's the way you shake hands. It's the way a client trusts that when you say, "We'll handle it," you do. They built a fortress of paper. But they didn't know I'd already laid down the blueprint for something they couldn't touch. I didn't need to fight back loudly. I just needed to move, in silence. In the back of my closet, tucked behind an old box of cables and photo albums, was a black folder I hadn't touched in years. Inside it were the incorporation papers for NovaCore Systems, a company I'd registered in a moment of burnout 3 years ago when the pressure at Morales Dynamics had nearly broken me. At the time, I didn't think I'd ever use it. It was a safety valve, not a plan. But now it felt like destiny, waiting patiently for permission. I powered up my laptop, opened the folder, and began reactivating everything. The business license was still valid. I had a quiet domain name, minimal branding, and a placeholder logo. The bank account was dormant but ready. Even the articles of incorporation were clean, just my name. No external partners, no family ties. I wasn't planning a war. I was preparing a foundation. My first calls were to the people who mattered most, not executives or board members, but the heart of the company, developers, engineers, and account managers who'd followed me for years. People who'd stayed late because I stayed with them. People who still referred to me as boss, even when Alex had taken my office. "Ethan, what's going on?" asked Lena, our lead product engineer. "Why is everything getting rerouted through Alex's side project?" I didn't lie. They've made some decisions I wasn't part of. I'm stepping away, but I'm building something new. Quietly. Her response was immediate. "Tell me where to send my resume." Over the next 48 hours, I had over a dozen quiet conversations. No promises, just possibilities. I asked them not to jump ship yet. Just be patient. I needed time to position things right, and I needed information. While Alex was busy posting on LinkedIn about next-gen innovation frameworks, I was digging into client satisfaction surveys, service history logs, vendor timelines, and personnel evaluations. I built a spreadsheet, not of what I'd lost, but of what I'd built. Column by column, it showed something they had overlooked. I wasn't part of Morales Dynamics. Morales Dynamics was part of me. Clients didn't sign on because of our logo. They stayed because when the servers crashed, I picked up the phone. Vendors didn't grant us discounts because of corporate partnerships. They trusted my handshake. Those weren't assets that could be reassigned. They were relationships with roots. Meanwhile, I called Ava, still inside the company. "I need a quiet update on any contracts expiring within 90 days, I said. She didn't ask questions. That's the thing about loyalty. When it's real, it doesn't need explanation. That night, I stared at the NovaCore homepage, a generic landing page with a single line of text solutions that adapt to you. It was forgettable, but I smiled, because I knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. They thought I would fade. They thought cutting me out meant I was finished. But they didn't know the truth. I had been building the next chapter long before they wrote me out of the last one. 2 weeks after the will reading, I watched the house I had built begin to crack quietly, then all at once. From the outside, Morales Dynamics looked strong. Alex had taken over with full authority and a full smile, holding investor briefings about transformational leadership and posting slick office photos with the hashtag Shamash New Era. Internally, though, it was a different story. His first big move was streamlining, cutting middle managers he claimed were redundant. These weren't paper pushers. They were veterans who had kept the operation alive during our leanest quarters. Sarah, who had managed DevOps for 9 years, gone. Leon from legal out. People who knew the pulse of the company and how to keep it steady, swept away in a single email sent late on a Friday. Next came the pricing overhaul. Alex believed our long-term contracts were leaving money on the table. He introduced new rate structures with across-the-board hikes regardless of the client's history. No grandfather clauses, no flexibility. Just spreadsheets and projections. He called it data-backed optimization. I called it lighting a match near a pile of dry leaves. By the end of the first week, one of our legacy clients, TriPoint Analytics, declined to renew. I had worked with them for 13 years through 2 rounds of funding and a near bankruptcy. When I reached out, their COO said, "Ethan, we trusted you, but your replacement speaks to us like we're an entry in a CRM. That was just the beginning." Alex eliminated our flexible payment schedule policy, something I had personally implemented to help clients navigate cash flow dips. For newer clients, it might not have mattered, but for older partners, it felt like betrayal. Within days, 2 more firms, Helix Core and Vital Bridge Systems, notified they'd be looking elsewhere. Internally, chaos mounted. Morale plummeted. Without Sarah and Leon, project delays stacked up. Engineering teams were frustrated by new approval protocols that added red tape to every feature release. Developers who once had the freedom to innovate now spent their time filling out planning decks for Alex's review. I watched from the outside, tracking it all through whispers and quiet calls from loyal insiders. They didn't need me to do anything. The damage was self-inflicted. Then came the most telling moment. CoreSure, one of our oldest and highest-paying clients, reached out to me directly. Ethan, their account lead, said this new guy doesn't understand our business. He keeps pushing changes we didn't ask for. If this keeps up, we'll have to reconsider. I gave the only answer I could without violating anything official: stay patient. You'll have options soon. Because behind the scenes, Novacor was moving forward, slowly, carefully. And Alex, for all his posturing, didn't realize he wasn't just losing accounts. He was bleeding trust drop by drop. Not because someone sabotaged him, but because he believed that profit replaces relationships and policies replace people. But business doesn't run on buzzwords. It runs on memory. And everyone remembered who they trusted before he walked in. I waited for the right moment when the cracks were deep enough to feel, but not yet visible to shareholders. It came on a Tuesday morning, 2.5 weeks after the transition. Alex called me, sounding unusually cordial. "Hey, Ethan," quick thought, he said. "What would you think about coming on in a consulting capacity? Just temporarily? We've had a few client concerns, and I think your voice could help calm the waters." He framed it like a favor, like I'd be lucky to stay involved. I listened without interrupting, then said I'd consider it if we structured it properly. I proposed managing a select group of accounts as a contractor, not an employee. Independent. Flexible. Alex didn't like that word independent, but he needed me more than he realized. "I'd take over the 5 accounts that represent the core of your annual revenue," I said. "But I work remotely, handle everything myself, and receive 25% of gross revenue on those accounts." "That's steep," he said, hesitating. "No," I replied calmly, "that's a discount, because if those accounts walk, you lose 100%. He took the deal. And just like that, I had a front-row seat and full access to every relationship that actually kept Morales Dynamics afloat. What Alex didn't realize was that he had just handed me the keys to his remaining credibility. Clients were more than happy to hear I'd still be around. Their tone changed immediately. "Oh, you'll still be involved, thank God," one of them said. What Alex interpreted as a transitional arrangement was for them a return to sanity. Over the next 3 weeks, I made it my mission to maintain professionalism on the surface while rebuilding loyalty underneath. I kept my calls warm and personal, no mention of the chaos behind the curtain, but every conversation ended with some variation of the same sentence. "If anything changes on our side, I'll make sure you're the first to know." And they always replied the same way, "Ethan, we follow you." Suppliers noticed too. I began asking subtle logistical questions about delivery cycles, contract expiration dates, and capacity. Not as Morales Dynamics, but as Ethan Morales Independent Consultant. Some knew what I was doing, some didn't. All of them cooperated. Meanwhile, I activated the Novacor back-end systems, email client portals, basic accounting tools. I brought in Ava discreetly to help configure the first contracts. Everything was clean, quiet, legal. By the time we were done, Novacor looked like a functioning operation on paper, and it was starting to become one in practice. The best part, Alex was paying me to rebuild the very thing he thought he had dismantled. Every invoice I sent for my consulting services funded the birth of the company that would replace him. To the board, it looked like a brilliant transition strategy. To the clients, it felt like a return to competence. To me, it was poetry, silent, professional, and precise. And to Alex, it was an invisible exodus he never saw coming. The unraveling began just as I'd expected, not with a bang, but with a spreadsheet. A week after I took over client communications as a contractor, Morales Dynamics' quarterly forecasts started falling apart. Projections that once looked bullish were suddenly full of red lines and missing invoices. Investors, once comforted by Alex's polished presentations, started asking pointed questions. Why is client retention dipping? Why haven't the renewals closed? Alex smiled through every call, but behind the scenes panic set in. Then came the shareholder meeting. A few partners dialed in early and asked that I stay on for transitional continuity. I declined. I wasn't part of Morales Dynamics anymore. Alex tried to cover for my absence by reciting high-level plans full of buzzwords, scalable pipeline innovations, data-driven service realignment. But the numbers didn't lie. One of our oldest accounts, Corsure, had officially exited the contract a day prior. I had already onboarded them at Novacor, quietly, seamlessly. Within the next 72 hours, 2 more clients exited. Then one of our main suppliers, Lambda Grid, who provided us with exclusive cloud architecture access, froze their priority support. They cited unresolved communication gaps. But I knew the truth: they didn't trust Alex. And without me, there was no bridge left. Alex scheduled an emergency call with me that Friday. "We need to talk," he said. "Something's off. Clients are acting weird. Suppliers, too. It feels coordinated." I played it cool. "I've only been doing what we agreed, managing client relations, staying neutral. If they're choosing to walk, it's not because I told them to. It's because they don't feel safe with your leadership." He didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then, almost desperately, "We can restructure your contract. Bring you back in, full-time, with equity." I declined. That same day, I received an anonymous email from a junior analyst at Morales. Attached was a copy of the internal financial report. It showed a 64% revenue dip in just 1 quarter. Client churn had tripled. Payroll was being delayed. And they had started liquidating marketing assets to buy more runway. Then came the lawsuit. Corsure filed a legal complaint claiming breach of service-level agreements tied to their transition. Alex tried to spin it as sabotage, but the board wasn't convinced. Valerie, once omnipresent in every decision, suddenly became quiet. Her name stopped appearing on internal memos. I later learned she had transferred her shares into a silent trust, likely preparing her own exit. The final blow came from the bank. Morales Dynamics had defaulted on their line of credit. The bank called in the loan. With major contracts gone, supplier relationships severed, and no backup infrastructure, the company collapsed like a cheap tent in the rain. Alex called me again. This time, there was no confidence in his voice, just confusion. "Ethan, what do you want?" I paused, then said, "I don't want anything, Alex. You got everything you asked for. But here's what you missed. What you inherited was a building. What I took with me was the business." And I hung up. The sign above our new headquarters didn't sparkle. It was a simple brushed steel plate mounted on the front of a converted warehouse in South San Jose. It read, "Novacor Systems, established 2024. No marble lobby, no startup ping-pong tables. Just clean lines, natural light, and the hum of something alive. Something real." The day Morales Dynamics filed for bankruptcy, we signed 2 new clients. Word had spread fast in the tech community, especially among engineers and mid-sized firms tired of being treated like numbers. The people who left Morales didn't just join us, they belonged with us. Ava came on full-time as Director of Client Success. Lena now led Product Engineering. Jimmy, our former logistics manager, was running internal operations with a calm efficiency I didn't know we'd missed until he returned. We didn't build Novacor to copy Morales. We built it to correct everything that had gone wrong with it. Fewer silos, more transparency. We rejected the bloated pitch decks and endless synergy sessions Alex had made standard. Here, results came first. Clients didn't get passed between departments. They had one contact, one relationship, one promise. We show up. Within 4 months, we had 12 core clients, 3 of which had been with Morales for over a decade. The others came by referral, some from industry peers, some from ex-employees who had joined other companies and pulled us in. In total, our revenue reached 60% of Morales Dynamics' last peak quarter, and we were doing it with half the staff without venture capital and no one looking over our shoulder. But growth wasn't the most satisfying part. The real victory was seeing people want to work again, not because they had to, because they believed in what we were building. Developers stayed late to polish features not because they were pressured, but because they were proud. Clients sent thank you notes. Engineers who had gone quiet under Alex's regime suddenly had ideas again. The culture was back, and this time it wasn't on lease. One afternoon, I was walking the floor with a coffee in hand when Lena waved me over. You hear the latest, she grinned. Corsure's head of procurement told me they turned down an offer from a competitor. Said they're done shopping around, they trust us. I nodded, not because I was surprised, but because I had never doubted it. Trust had always been the asset Morales Dynamics never understood. Later that week, I stood by the main loading dock, watching our new signage being installed on the delivery trucks. NovaCore Systems. I didn't need the name Morales on anything. I wasn't interested in rebuilding what was lost. I was building what should have existed all along. And for the first time in over a year, I felt something I hadn't let myself feel since that lawyer closed the will folder and slid it away from me. Not anger, not resentment. Peace. Because I hadn't just taken my revenge. I'd taken back my name by creating something they couldn't touch. In business and in life, there are people who chase legacy with loud declarations, expensive suits, and borrowed vision. And then there are people who build it one quiet decision at a time. You don't need applause to prove your worth. You just need proof in relationships, in respect in how people respond when your name is no longer on the building, but still on their minds. What happened to Morales Dynamics wasn't sabotage. It was consequence. Because trust isn't inherited. It's earned. And when the wrong people take credit for what they didn't build, the truth always catches up quietly, like a shadow that never left. Some people burn bridges. Others carry the blueprints and rebuild on their own land. If this story reminded you of something you've lived or something you've survived, drop a comment below and let it be known. A simple phrase is, "Enough, I rebuilt in silence." And if you found power in this story, take a moment to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a reminder. Your legacy doesn't live in paper. It lives in the people who never stop believing in you. Because the best revenge isn't loud. It's permanent.